Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again from my rational perspective on Chelsea 0, Man City 1, Chelsea lose again in the Premier League. I believe that's 4 defeats in our last 6 league games. It's depressing, there's no way around it, even if I am going to speak about some positives and some performances I think that were of encouragement tonight. Just kind of reflects why those drop points at Nottingham Forest on Sunday were really damaging. Listen, a defeat for Chelsea is really damaging at this point in the season, and especially with the circumstance and the form and the concern and all the problems we've had so far this season. But I think the mood, if we would have won on Sunday and put in a better performance, and I think coming into this game and you know the way the game played out, I think maybe there would have been less negativity, but it's a defeat. That's what it is, and we have to live with the reality. And puts Chelsea further away from the Champions League places. I think that's like over 400 minutes since we last scored against Man City in a competitive game, which is staggering, really, when you consider, you know, the spring of 2021 when we beat them in the Champions League final, we beat them in the FA Cup, we beat them in the Premier League, and you know it started to look like Chelsea were turning the tide a bit against Man City, but you know losing to them both times in the league last season, and we've already lost to them twice this year as well in the League Cup and now the Premier League. As I say, I think there were positives. I think in terms of, you know, looking at Chelsea's performances, say, against Arsenal at home back in November against another top side, but it's the same result. And that's the problem. It's still a 1-0 defeat. So I know whatever I say, people will just turn around and go, well, it's a 1-0 defeat. But I did think, specifically in the first half, I think in the second half, Man City changed things. Pep Guardiola made some really smart subs, and I think Chelsea's rhythm of the game, maybe some of the subs that Graham Potter made could be criticised in terms of maybe players who could have stayed on a little bit longer and were impacting things positively. But it, for me, comes down to one moment. And, you know, at this level, that's what it is. Sometimes, you know, it is a moment and a mistake between, I think, two players you can look at from the Chelsea side. It's a brilliant ball from Jack Grealish, but we'll get into that. And, you know, another thing about this night was Injury FC striking again. Chelsea up to 10 injuries now for senior players or first team players out of this game. Going into it wasn't good. Mason Mount was ruled out with an injury that he suffered in training yesterday. So the starting lineup was Kepa, Azpilicueta, Thiago Silva, Koulibaly, Cucurella, Zakaria, Kovacic, Pulisic, Ziyech, Sterling and Havertz. And within the first 20 minutes, 2 of those players had to be replaced, and that was Pulisic and Raheem Sterling. Firstly, Raheem Sterling against his old club pulling up with a hamstring problem. He was replaced with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and then Pulisic was replaced by Carney Chukwuemeka. So very early on into a game where Chelsea were under pressure already, you know, already plans were disrupted, and an ongoing problem that has been a problem for some time, but seems to be really getting to a boiling point this year in terms of injuries to key players. I mean, 10 senior players there. I'll just read them out for you right now. Mendy, Fofana, James, Kante, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Ben Chilwell, Mason Mount, Amanda Broya, Sterling and Pulisic. I do not care who you are. That is going to impact your plans. That is astonishing. And the worry for me is the number of injuries that we are seeing now from players that are... I mean, I'm not a medical expert. I'm not an injury expert. But, you know, there is a difference in sport between, say, impact injuries like leg breakers, which are very hard, almost impossible to avoid and do any prep for. Those are the ones that happen within a game of 50-50 challenge. You know, a player getting a concussion maybe, compared to these kind of softer, you know, hamstring injuries or strains or whatever it is that are keeping players out for even short but extended periods of time. In some cases, that's a real problem, and it just derails a lot of the plans. And players who have been very durable in their career coming into Chelsea and suffering injuries, like Raheem Sterling, who's remained pretty fit at Man City over the past decade. So that in itself is a concern, and once again is going to disrupt Graham Potter's plans when he needs, you know, a real big response from his Chelsea squad to really lift the mood. But I felt that Chelsea in that first half, despite that disruption, I think played pretty well. I think particularly the central area of Chelsea's formation and team tonight, for large periods, I think dominated Man City and I think showed some real promise. And in particular, two players that stood out to me was one of the substitutes, Carney Chukwuemeka, who hit the post, was the closest, who came closest for Chelsea tonight in terms of scoring. Just looked really inspired. I think looked really assured in himself. He's got minutes under Graham Potter so far this season. They have been steadily increasing, but this was a real performance where he was called upon, and I think he showed himself at a level that he could compete with one of the best teams in this league, the Premier League champions, the reigning Premier League champions. And I think he done himself a lot of credit. He really did in it, and I think there'll be a lot of calls for him to play again against Man City on Sunday, and then moving forward, hopefully playing more if he doesn't get injured, because so many players are getting injured at the moment. Another one is a player we have been praising over the past week, is Denis Zakaria. He has really changed, I think, the perception of him. And again, I don't think Zakaria is doing anything incredible, astonishing. There are parts of his game that still look a little bit raw, a little bit erratic on the ball. Maybe sometimes he looks a little bit indecisive, but it shows the difference of having someone in a central area who just has a bit of mobility, a bit of physicality, and can move at speed with that ball and really transition it. For a long time, especially when we don't have N'Golo Kante, it's Mateo Kovacic who you saw do that tonight for Chelsea. To have someone else in that area, and you can even add sort of Carney Chukwuemeka there, it makes a massive difference in that central area when Chelsea were trying to build up the play. I also felt in that first half he massively faded in the second, but Kai Havertz was looking a lot more encouraging, playing more as a number 10 tonight. That did change as the game went on, but I felt he was looking more like that player we saw by Leverkusen, where he was dropping a little bit deeper. I think kind of what we saw under Frank Lampard in his very early stages at Chelsea, and a little bit under Graham Potter recently. So there was that, and Chelsea, I felt Hakim Ziyech, I felt on the left, Cucurella and Koulibaly were playing well in terms of connecting and getting Chelsea up the pitch. There was just a sense that Chelsea weren't just sitting back and resigning themselves to a 1-0 defeat. At the time, at 0-0, it looked like Chelsea could really get something out of this game. But that changed at half-time. Pep Guardiola changes things. I think he could see that the tempo and the momentum of the game was not with Man City, and if that continued, it was probably going to end up maybe in a defeat for them. And the changes he made and also the intensity to which Man City came out made a big difference. Chelsea started to commit errors in their own half, which is always going to cause problems. I think Kevin De Bruyne started to get on the ball a lot more and cause problems. Nathan Ake hit the post, and then Jack Grealish with a brilliant ball across the box. Now, it's an amazing ball, and it's that connection and those automatisms that we see at Man City so regularly, but you have to look at Kepa Arrizabalaga firstly in that situation. Why isn't he diving? Why isn't he committing? This isn't a hindsight thing. It wasn't an astonishing ball that was just out of his reach. He seemed to, for a player who I think we've praised in recent months since he's come back into the team for being a lot more commanding. That was old Kepa. That was an indecisive Kepa. And at a moment, as I say, you look back at that game in terms of chances for both teams, and I think that's a match-winning moment. It really is. It's always, you don't know what happens if they don't score, and Man City were on top. And I don't think I can argue with them scoring. They were creating chances, but those are the moments that could have got Chelsea at least a point and maybe changed the complexion of the game going into the last period of it. And Marc Cucurella, I think you can maybe have a go at for tracking there. We've seen this a few times with him defensively, one-on-one. I felt offensively he looked encouraging tonight, but that will be the shame of it for him in what was up to that point an encouraging performance. But then from there, he takes off, I think he took off Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who of course came on early as a substitute. He took off Hakim Ziyech, who I felt was having a good game. And just, I felt, with set pieces especially, if Chelsea were going to try and get back into the game, I felt maybe I would have liked to keep on with that left foot. He put some dangerous ones in, particularly one in the first half. But he was taken off. Conor Gallagher came on, who at times, I think he just, because he is doing a lot of cameo appearances at the moment, I feel that Conor kind of looks a little bit erratic for me. He's coming on and he's just flying into challenges. He's kind of just so determined, I think, to impress, and it feels like he's kind of taken a step backwards to where we saw him under Thomas Tuchel, where he's so eager to impress, he maybe goes over the line a little bit with that pressing. But I felt that Chukwuemeka and Zakaria and Kovacic too continued to impress, and Chelsea did not implode at that point. It wasn't like Man City, the worst thing would be for Man City to score 2-3 and then really put the game out of sight. Chelsea was still technically in it. It was just we weren't creating a lot of opportunities. And once again, in that centre forward area, you were kind of thinking, where is that focal point and where is that area of attack that we're going to go towards? And we really struggled to create chances. Do want to praise Lewis Hall, who came on for Cucurella later on and had a great chance late on, but skied it over. But still, for me, looks like a player who's fully ready for more first team minutes, and really great to see, really encouraging. And I really hope this period, these injuries are going to kind of be a blessing in disguise in terms of getting some of these younger players. Amari Hutchinson, I can't go without mentioning him getting his, I think, Chelsea debut tonight. I'm pretty sure the Aston Villa friendly game doesn't really count. This was his competitive debut for Chelsea. That's one of my predictions for 2023 that has been proved correct. So it's good to see him. I think he struggled a little bit to really impact things, but he's getting that experience now on what is a big stage. So I know that the reaction will be pessimistic. Obviously, it's another defeat for Chelsea. The pressure is going to increase on that. But I can't sit here and tell you that the performance was woeful. It was embarrassing. It wasn't awful, but a bit like when we last faced Man City, I think that people would be more accepting or kind of more understanding if results in games Chelsea is supposed to be doing much better in were better. I think people would take it a little bit more. I don't think they're going to take it with looking at the form table and looking at where Chelsea are in the league and looking at some of the teams who we really should not be below in the table despite the struggles we faced. We go into that game on Sunday where I'm sure there's going to be rotation for both sides and maybe things will be different, but it's not a good place for Chelsea at the moment. There's no way around it. It still defeats. It still feels bad. There still is going to be that low mood, and really picking it up is a real challenge. So let me know your opinions. Thank you for listening on the podcast. Just want to say Son of Chelsea is a part of the 90 Min podcast network. Please do hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.